Welcome, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark, and I am super excited to have on today Corey from Private Key Publishing. He is the man behind my podcasts. Corey, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Lark.
Pleasure to have you on, without a doubt. And, get everyone introduced, they can see your face, it's great.
I pop on the camera every once in a while, but I spend 99% of my time behind the scenes coordinating. I do a lot of PR and I do all the technical work and social media stuff for all the podcasts.
Nice. Now, we're going to be talking about quite a few different topics today, but we're going to start off talking about some market trends. Then we're going to talk about social media, media trends, trends in crypto media, and a little bit of all that stuff. So stick around for that part. That's going to be a really juicy part of the conversation. I want to just get your thoughts real quick. What's going on in the markets? Let's start off with Bitcoin. What do you think Bitcoin's up to these days? You think Bitcoin is becoming more powerful than ever? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. It is absolutely more powerful than ever. And people seem to associate its true value with the price. And that is a really bad correlation. If you look at Bitcoin's history, this is the fourth wave of Bitcoin, and waves are typically defined by a drop of 90%. So to me, this is nothing out of the ordinary. These are trends that have been followed since the beginning. And so if you look at it from that perspective and look at like a logarithmic chart, we're still not predicted to hit a low until October of 2019. Now, there's a lot of hype in the markets right now. There's a lot of things going on with Bitcoin. There's talk about backed and all this stuff. And I don't really consider like institutional investment, like people talk about it, as a necessity for Bitcoin's growth. But there is a lot of buzz in that area. So ultimately, Bitcoin is a technology. It's a financial instrument second, right? It's an instant messenger that sends value. The value that people place on it is more of a byproduct of its functionality, and the functionality and fundamentals haven't changed. In fact, when you look at what's going on with Lightning, it blows me away every time I think about what's happening, and then I look at the price of around $4,000. This is insane pricing. This is a fire sale. This is the time to accumulate because, as Peter Saddington likes to say, you can't uninvent Bitcoin.
That's right. That's very, very right. The institutional money thing is so interesting to me because I talk about it a lot, because it's an important part of the overall news story. But one thing I always like to reiterate, we don't need Wall Street. Bitcoin is like the antidote to Wall Street. And they
Correct.
are going to get involved whether we like it or not. And I think that's an important part of the picture. I don't really want Wall Street to be launching all these things. It's important in a way because, yeah, okay, we can get hedge funds and certain people who are prohibited from investing in Bitcoin, blah, 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 blah. But, dude, seriously, like when it comes down to it, what we need is everyone in the world using Bitcoin. That is where real price action, for everyone who's interested in price action. We all love price action. Anyone who says, I'm just in it for the technology. I'll take the sick gains too. I like making
Right.
money. I don't want to live under a bridge and have Bitcoin. But the real value and what makes Bitcoin so damn exciting is what it actually does.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions in this space. And you hear the word blockchain thrown around a lot. Like if you have a blockchain, you're going to make a bunch of money. To me, it rings of the .com era when people thought that if you had a .com, you would make a ton of money. And that's really just not the case. And if you ask me personally, blockchain is not really the innovation that makes Bitcoin exciting. The really exciting part about Bitcoin is Satoshi's implementation of proof of work to prevent double spend. That is, digital data has always been able to be easily copied and distributed, but you can't copy Bitcoin, right? It's the first time we've ever had digital scarcity. That is the innovation, not blockchain. Blockchain is the after effect. It's necessary only if you're at risk of being censored, right? So Bitcoin is uncensorable money, and the blockchain is basically that is just a form of database. But Satoshi's implementation of proof of work really is the true innovation that gets too often overlooked.
Well said. And the censorship resistance thing, I always say this too, is that if you live in, the USA or something, and you just have your bank card and you go and tap it on things and buy stuff, like you're probably not really experiencing the censorship, but you are, even to a small extent, because there will be certain stores that don't accept your credit card. That's a little form of censorship. Not really, but a little form of censorship. But when it comes to sanctions regimes, for example, that is censorship on a massive scale. When it comes to deplatforming people from PayPal or from the credit card networks, what happened to WikiLeaks was some serious censorship when it comes down to it. And of course, Bitcoin doesn't care about any of that stuff, which is always amazing.
Correct. The censorship is a big deal, and that's really the only reason why Bitcoin came into existence in the first place. Well, besides the elimination of the third party, the censorship-resistant aspect of Bitcoin is its most important and valuable property.
Now, we can't see it right now, but you're wearing an interesting shirt today.
Don't
Yes.
trust beer.
So what are your thoughts on the Bitcoin forks, Bitcoin Cash, and then Bitcoin Satoshi Vision?
I would hate to imagine that Peter Schiff has ever been right about anything. But he is right in as far as Bitcoin is counterfeitable. They just call it a fork. I do not believe that any of these forks of Bitcoin have any improvement over the original protocol. People who are forking it and then calling it Bitcoin something whatever are doing nothing more than riding Bitcoin's coattails. Bitcoin Cash was the first, and it was done by Jihan Wu and Roger Ver. And what did we find out today? That Jihan Wu is no longer the CEO of Bitmain. You know, you mess with the Bitcoin bull, you get the Bitcoin horns. That's how it goes. Bitcoin, Bitcoin is it's unstoppable. And honestly, if you look at its patterns, it's almost a life form of its own. It's the decentralized nature of it has really given it its own life.
Yeah, it's a cultural phenomena in a way that we've never understood money to be like a cultural phenomenon. Like seriously, like are there a bunch of YouTube channels talking about like, oh man, did you see the US dollar today? Oh, so cool.
Yes, yes. Maybe some financial nerds are following the dollar every day, but the dollar is going one direction and it's going down. We've lost 94% of purchasing power just in the last like 50 years or something like that. And you can really trace that back, the origins of that in the late 1950s. And this is directly connected to the income divide here, at least in the US. Late 1950s, the wealth gap started to gradually increase. And then in 1971, when we went off the gold standard, which is a pivotal moment, that's when they just really began to print money at will. And that really took away almost all value. Now the only thing the dollar is backed by is the US military. And when you look at countries that try to get off it, like, I don't know, Libya or Iraq or Syria, what's going on in those countries today? That is completely connected to de-dollarization, which is inevitable. The world's moving away from the dollar. Look at what China and Russia are doing right now with their gold-backed yuan oil exchange. Yep. Once Saudi Arabia ditches us and gets with them, it's over. There's really no coming back from that.
And I've talked about the idea of a U.S. economic collapse and all these different ideas, and nothing I would ever want to happen, you know, because that's going to cause so much misery for regular people. And the reality is the oligarchs and all these people, they're usually not very much affected by these kind of events. You know, oh my gosh, I lost, you know, I had $100 billion. Now I have $50 billion. I'm so depressed now. Right. So for them, it's very different. You know, I have to downgrade. I can only have 10 yachts instead of 15 now. Damn. You know, what are my friends going to think? But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the idea of this overall economic collapse, there is de-dollarization happening, and it's happening every single day. And the U.S. has kind of pushed that narrative themselves, unfortunately, by censoring people, by cutting countries out of the international financial system. You can agree or disagree with the politics of those countries, and it's not a political conversation. I don't want to take it there, but the reality is that move is happening because, like you said, it is a currency backed by a military primarily, and that's not a very good selling point for a lot of countries to adopt.
Correct. And I think another key moment in history, very recent history, is that the U.S. threatened the overseers of the SWIFT system that if they failed to comply with sanctions in certain places, that they would arrest them. That is absolute insanity. And that had to have left an absolutely appalling impression with places that are already at risk of sanctions. Yeah. So that really does nothing but cause other nations to want to get off the dollar quicker.
Yeah.
And I think that's great for Bitcoin because whether or not nations around the world are talking about it, they've got some smart people behind the scenes who understand Bitcoin's core value proposition And whether or not it can be utilized as a like a merchant-based currency that you'd use to buy stuff in stores, governments are looking at it on a large scale. You talked about the possibility of Russia buying 1 million Bitcoins. I mean, what do you think that's going to do to the price? How many nations are there going to try to get 1 million Bitcoins? They're not going to be able to, you know.
That's
as
right.
it stands right now, there's only about 5 million Bitcoins actually circulating. Everything else is locked down in cold storage. So that's going to be tough. You'll see a $10 million Bitcoin in our lifetime. I mean, I have absolutely no doubts. Tom Lee, who is and isn't always 100% on his predictions, he made the prediction of a $10 million Bitcoin based on generational investment trends, going back and comparing it to the Nikkei Stock Exchange and to gold, and looking at millennials and Generation Z. The combined investment power of those two generations in the next 10, 20 years is going to dwarf what previous generations have invested. So, we might have to wait another decade, but the reality is Bitcoin, to me, is the only long-term viable censorship-resistant currency that people have in the world. Everything else, to me, is kind of like, it's kind of a cheap copy. We haven't really decided the fate of decentralized applications yet, so who knows what that's going to do. But really, Bitcoin is it, and whether the world realizes it or not, its rise is inevitable.
It's the investment opportunity of our lifetime, basically, when you look at it. And, to say that some people out there, but $10 million, that's totally insane. That could never happen. It's too much. It's too big of a number, et cetera, et cetera. I look at that and I think, well, back when it was $3, people probably never thought it was going to be worth $20,000. And $10 million is a lot. But when you start to think about how much capital globally right now is underexploited, underserved, or locked up due to the current financial system, because we have an outdated financial system where people need to go to banks. We have entire continents, countries with millions and millions of people where you've got people basically locked out of the global economy. They can't access money. And just for anybody who has a bank account and a bank card, just imagine how easy your life is. You can put your money somewhere relatively safe. That's relatively safe in a bank.
Relatively, yeah.
Yeah. You have this ease of being able to easily send payments back and forth, at least easy enough, using your bank card. A lot of people don't have access to that. So when we unlock all these people with decentralized monies where people don't need to come in with their passport, because not everyone has a passport, not everyone can prove who they are. There's all these crazy situations going on. We're going to unlock trillions in capital globally. It's going to be one of the biggest economic booms, on par with the previous giant economic revolutions, getting all these extra 3 or 4 billion people involved in the global economy. So in that situation, you can really see how a $10 million Bitcoin could easily be possible, because right now, the current financial system excludes half of the world, which is totally broken.
Absolutely. I think the future for Bitcoin is very bright. The problem, I think, is that really it's complicated, and to really grasp it, you have to kind of grasp the actual technology itself. And most of the world isn't really technologically savvy. They don't know how cell phones work. They don't, I don't know how a microprocessor works. God, that's fascinating to me, and I use a computer every day. So people are hesitant because they don't get it. But I kind of learned a long time ago to listen to people who I can definitely tell are smarter than I am. And so when I have any questions, I just fall back to those people.
That's it. Be hungry for knowledge all the time. And
Absolutely.
I imagine someone like Andreas Antonopoulos is just so much information, so much knowledge. It's an amazing source for anybody out there who's listening to this right now. And you don't follow Andreas Antonopoulos yet, you should really go do it, because that guy is just so full of information. It's crazy. Now, I want to switch the conversation over a little bit to trends in crypto media. So obviously, you run Private Key Publishing, and it's a podcast with a lot of the top cryptocurrency channels, right? Mine included, a lot of others as well. But what are you seeing as the current trends happening in crypto media?
Well, I haven't really seen many changes, particularly in the YouTube crypto culture. I mean, I've seen it grow, and I've seen certain channels have numbers that blow away others, but in general, I'm seeing a lot of more of the same. And I feel as though with this podcast publishing company, really I tapped into something that no one else realizes yet. When you look at podcasting, people think that, oh, it's been around for 10, 15 years already, and that it's kind of like solidified in place, but it's not. This is still the infancy kind of level with audio podcasting. Just to make a comparison here real quick, in 2017, the projected revenues from podcasting were supposed to be just over 200 million. It hit 317 million, I believe. Now let's compare audio podcasting in China. Audio podcasting in China brought in $7.3 billion last year compared to our 317 million. So that alone tells me that there's massive room for growth. And I don't think it hit that number just because there's 1.5 billion Chinese. It hit it because more people per capita are engaged, right? So I think it will be, right now I think that a lot of the audio podcasting is thought of as an afterthought. A lot of guys who are doing crypto podcasts are doing YouTube videos and they're like, oh, I have to put it up on iTunes also. And so they throw it up on iTunes and that's it. But you're going to see in the next, in my opinion, 3 to 5 years, podcasting is going to surpass pretty much all other forms of media. Currently, right now, there's over 100 podcasting platforms. Most of them aggregate from iTunes. But due to the fact that there's so many of these companies, and there really isn't one leader other than iTunes, which really is just a large-scale aggregator, there's not really as much censorship as you would think, right? So if you have an issue with one particular host, you can jump to another host. I don't think you're going to see the censorship in podcasting that you're seeing in YouTube or any place else. That plus it's easy, it's portable, it's on the go. And a lot of people can consume audio podcasts while they're working, and they can't watch TV while they're working. Exactly. They can consume audio podcasting while they're driving. They can't watch TV while they're driving. People who listen to audio podcasts consume audio podcasts more than they consume any other form of media. So that, and when you look at statistics and the consistent rise of engagement with podcasting, it's really amazing what's going on. And really nobody in the crypto space is capitalizing on it except for a couple guys. I mean, you got Peter McCormick doing what Bitcoin did. I've talked to him. He's on point and he knows what's going on and he's doing really good numbers. Really, I can't name
Unchained. I don't know how well that podcast.
I don't consider her a crypto podcast. I don't consider that a crypto podcast at all. That's a financial podcast that attempts to talk about crypto. But that's just my opinion. So I don't even include her. She's not in the space. She doesn't participate with us. She doesn't engage with us. She's on some other imaginary level that I don't know what her deal is.
In the legacy media,
correct,
right?
Absolutely. But that's all going to change in the next couple of years. And also Bitcoin is on the rise. And so I think there's going to be this convergence of the rise in popularity of Bitcoin and the rise in popularity of podcasting. And we are going to be right there in the middle of the storm. And so unfortunately, I think we're at least 1.5 years, 2 years out before it really pops. So I have a lot of biding my time to do. But once it hits, it's going to be something beautiful.
Well, and the thing that one of the key aspects here is actually the rise in mobile information consumption. And you've got limits. You have data limits on your phone. You know, maybe some people have packages where they don't have data limits, but a lot of people throughout the world do have. You know, they only get 2 gigabytes a month or something, or 5 gigabytes a month, whatever it's going to be. And especially in the developing world where that infrastructure just isn't as built out yet. I mean, if you live in the center of New York City, you're going to have a very different experience than if you live in, you know, a small town in South Africa, for example. Your data limits on your phone are probably very different. And watching YouTube videos takes a huge amount of your data. But podcasts, very different story because it's just an audio file.
Absolutely. The compression on, and plus the compression on these audio files is amazing. It's amazing how much data you can squeeze into like how little data it takes to put a 1 or 2 hour podcast out. It's really, it's amazing. It's very, very data efficient.
Which is amazing. So that's how we get information across to people. I mean, visuals, fantastic. This is a visual conversation, but for people who do eventually listen to this as a podcast, just think how much data you saved. Interesting concept. Anyway, now, in terms of, I want to talk a little bit about censorship, because censorship has been such a big trend recently, particularly in social media platforms. You know, we've seen people getting deplatformed from everything from Twitter and Facebook, and all the major social media platforms are deplatforming people for one reason or another. They've all become very political very quickly, and they'll say, yeah, but it's our terms and service and all this stuff. Like, really, guys, your terms and service? Like, I look at, for example, what Facebook has done with crypto. You can't do any crypto ads on Facebook, and yet every time I go to Facebook, I don't go to Facebook very often, but when I do go over to Facebook, I always see some kind of like Forex scam or something like this. So it's really quite anti-crypto selective. So what are your thoughts on this?
The censorship is a problem. Like we were talking earlier, if someone has a perspective that is just completely antisocial and it's just horrific to most people, then you have the right to publicly mock them, and that's the way to go, as opposed to deplatforming them. If you're deplatforming them, it makes it seem like you're trying to hide something, and I just don't get that. A good friend of mine, Ryan Dawson, he's a filmmaker. He's made a lot of films on 9/11. He was just deplatformed from Vimeo. He was no longer allowed to sell his videos on Vimeo. And so he kept challenging them on what he did wrong and how he broke the terms of service. And they eventually responded that they believed that the theme of his videos was, quote, mean-spirited, and it had nothing to do with a violation of his terms of service. So, no platform is safe, especially look at what's going on with STEEMIT right now.
Yeah.
And the deplatformization from STEEMIT of the Dark Overlord, who is in the process of dumping the 9/11 files. I just have to comment, there's a great misconception about blockchain and what it does for censorship in media, because your media on a platform has nothing to do with the cryptocurrency that's attached to the blockchain. Like, people think that, oh, I have a video up on STEEMIT, it can't be censored. That's not true. That's not how the technology works. They're two separate technologies that really are not even intertwined on the platform that deeply. So any platform, whether it's d.tube, BitChute, whatever it is, they can be forced to censor. When the powers that be crack down on them, censorship will occur. That is reality. And is there a solution to that with a blockchain? And the answer is absolutely not. Is there a solution to that anywhere, period? The answer is absolutely not. So, but the thing is, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. If they censor one platform, two more will pop up to take its place. And so they can't win in the long run, but in the short term, they can make our lives very difficult.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to something like Steam, it's that video hosting, right? I use d.tube, I post my videos on d.tube, I try to support the Steam platform, right? But when it comes down to it, that whole idea, it's easy to, for example, encrypt a message. We saw, for example, some messages which were encrypted on like Ethereum, for example. Remember, there's a story about a Chinese girl who was kicked out of her university because her professors, I think, had sexually assaulted her, and she took it to her university board and they said, shut up, go away. And so she posted her story on the Ethereum blockchain. Now, I don't know the validity of that story, any of that stuff, whatever, but that was a message that got through censorship resistance. But it was very basic in the way that it was set up. Now, in terms of hosting a video on the Steam platform, there was a time I remember when the Steam moderators shut my account down because they thought that I wasn't me. And it took me a couple weeks of talking to them, or maybe a couple days, maybe not such a couple weeks, but still, that decision was made by some person sitting there using their power to cut someone's voice out. And so that happens, right? The financial transactions happening on Steam are something different as opposed to the video hosting, or as opposed to the moderators running the platform. So that's something to keep in mind. A blockchain is really only good for tracking the movements of its own internal currency. I have a big problem with people attempting to somehow link real world assets with a blockchain, because a blockchain really, it only documents and stores the movements of its own currency. That's it. So I can envision a lot of implementations of blockchain that are not Bitcoin, but I see really the only other use of a cryptocurrency that's not Bitcoin is to be used as like a leverage, a financial leverage tool, right? Maybe derivatives or something like that, a representative value. And I hate to say this, the only company that's ever done that so far is BitConnect, and most people interpret that as a scam, which I'll debate with anybody anytime. So, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I don't think
attempting to link media platforms with a blockchain and saying that they're censorship resistant is really being genuine. Anything can be censored.
Yeah, the censorship resistance is such a hard thing because there's different levels of censorship resistance, and that's something. Again, we take all these blanket terms and just assume it's a black or white issue, like centralized versus decentralized, right? Well, there's often some kind of scale between how centralized something is and how decentralized something is. It's not a on or off switch essentially, and this kind of works in the same way, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, censorship. Those guys. Now, the Dark Overlord dump is quite interesting to see that happening, but this is not the first time, of course, that people trying to spread information have found themselves at the wrong end of censorship actions. Obviously, WikiLeaks was one of the early adopters of Bitcoin, which is why, the ongoing situation with Assange is continually so interesting to see how this one person has been so abandoned by their own government, which is, where's Australia, by the way? But to see all the media just falling right in line with the narrative that somehow Assange is the bad guy for telling people the truth.
Yes. Well, here's the thing, especially here in America, which kind of like sets the global narrative, unfortunately. When you look at the CNN, NBC, MSNBC, all of those networks have parent companies. And when you look at the parent companies, their board of directors is all overlapping with board of directors of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. Mm-hmm. So basically what you end up with is the Pentagon acts as a big umbrella corporation with media kind of interlaced in there. And so they're all pro-war. Like this whole thing of, oh my God, I can't believe Trump's getting out of Syria. Us being in Syria is a war crime. It was not voted on by Congress. It's opposed by the entire world. And we're only there for one reason. It has nothing to do with oil, and it has nothing to do with any value to the United States whatsoever. We're there to sell weapons, period. Yep. And so basically, you cannot trust the media because they are nothing more than the outlet for the Pentagon to control the narrative.
But
plain and simple.
Hey, Corey, come on. But we're being you have to keep it real. Come on. I know that like Lockheed's headed by a woman now. So I mean that's cool, man. We got women dropping the bombs now. We got women in charge of the company. So that's cool. That's progress, right?
Hey, that just shows that women can be ruthless scumbags too. If you ask me.
Seriously, and this is what it comes down to. You've got a system which is just inherently pro-war, no matter what.
No matter what.
Which is totally abhorrent. I mean, here we are. Everybody wants the same thing, and everything you hear in the media, demonizing other nationalities or completely ignoring or dehumanizing other nationalities. People in Yemen are just like anyone else. People in Syria are just like anyone else. This narrative of the good guys versus the bad guys, and it's all so dark. It's just dark, man, because it's all about making money. This short-term greed mentality is...
Well, I'd say that it's also about continuing and growing the global hegemony of the United States.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that to me is the worst part. I mean, we could just get along with everybody and we could have amazing things, but we can't have nice things because we'd rather go blow other people up.
What did they spend in Iraq? $7 trillion. Imagine if they'd spent half that money building schools and roads and...
they don't have money for that. We can't afford to do any of that stuff.
Oh, I know. Well, I'm just saying in Iraq. Iraq would be everyone's best. Iraq would be one of the greatest countries in the world right now.
Absolutely.
Instead, that was spent, on private contractors and bombs and all this stuff. And I think that actually, it brings us back to a larger point about Bitcoin. And this is, I know there's a lot of people out there in the audience. So anytime I talk about anything political, say, stop talking about politics. I didn't come here for politics. I came here for Bitcoin. I came here for crypto knowledge. And this is an inherent part of the conversation. And anybody who doesn't understand that about Bitcoin, this is the system of the past. Well, the current system is the system of the past, but the dying of that system is an incredibly violent and terrible process. I always like to think about the future, right? In the year, let's say the year 3000. Do you think in the year 3000 we're still going to be dropping bombs on each other? Do you think the nation state's still going to exist? And those concepts, we're so wedded to them It's really hard for people to look and go, yeah, but my country's always going to be here. Well, look at recent history. Countries have not always been here. In fact, the nation state is a new concept, and nation states have risen and fallen at a great speed throughout the last couple hundred years. Just because your country's been there for a while doesn't mean in 1,000 years that your country even should. We shouldn't even have countries. It's such a false concept to think that we all live on one planet, and this is my piece of land, and this is my piece of land, and I'm going to kill you over it. It's so barbaric and outdated. We need to move to the future, and part of that future is the finance of the future, because the whole fiat system, the whole central banking system, it supports the war machine, and it supports the exclusion of billions of people from the global economy every day.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that there's many points in history that you can see where things took a turn for the worse. But the one thing I really don't think that people get as to why the state of the world is the way it is really because the intelligence communities that really no one ever talks about kind of hijacked our policies, at least here in the U.S. And you can kind of trace that back to Allen Dulles when he took over control of the CIA. Allen Dulles was the top lawyer at the top corporate law firm in the world. So when he formed the CIA, he didn't do it for the United States' best interest. He did it for multinational corporation interests. That's why you see the CIA going in and committing basically war crimes against other countries covertly and saying it's for national security. It's not. It's for global corporatocracy is what it's for. And that to me is horrifying because it's not changing.
No, it's scary. It's scary. These intelligence organizations, they don't represent a nation necessarily. They represent transnational corporations. It's all about money. You know, the politicians in most countries are bought. You know, I see policies that are passed, you know, and recently here in New Zealand, we banned single-use plastic bags. I mean, that's cool. I appreciate that. I don't know why we didn't do that 20 years ago. And like, that's just like, that, what? Like the picture.
See, that's pretty cool. While here in the U.S., we have 800,000 government employees who are told they got to go to work and not get paid. And I saw an article today that at our national parks, there's garbage overflowing because no one's cleaning it up. It's absolutely disgusting. We live in bizarro universe, I swear.
Yeah, and again, it all goes back to this idea of just why are we still doing this? Why are we still doing the politics thing? Why are we still doing political parties and all this stuff? Like we're told that this is the only way we can govern our society, and I just don't think it's true. I think that we've given power to the wrong people, and we didn't give it to them. They took it, and then they said we gave it to them. And that in of itself is problematic. We need to take back our power. Now, what do you think about this story that the Yellow Vests in France are going to do a bank run? Do you think it's actually going to happen? And if so, what do you think the implications of that could be in terms of self-sovereignty and stuff?
Honestly, I didn't hear about that, and it's strange because I keep up with that stuff pretty tight. Can you define bank run?
Yeah, well, I don't know the the validity of it, but I've been definitely hearing the rumors that the Yellow Vests are going to organize for everyone to go to the bank and withdraw all their money.
I think that'd be a great idea. I think that they're trying to crack down on the Yellow Vests. I know that they either just did or they're about to pass a law in France making these Yellow Vest protests officially illegal, so that anybody can be arrested for it. There's a lot more of us than there are of them, and unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I think we're at a point where activities like the Yellow Vest is the only option that we have, and that the entire world is due for an actual physical revolution, which is going to be a scary thing. It's going to affect everything, every sector, you name it. The world's going to be in chaos once it actually happens. But unfortunately, I think here in America, too, people are too placated. You know, the news is like the opium for the people, you know, and it keeps them kind of placated. And they would never imagine in a million years that their government is not on their side, and they're not. They're simply not. We are more of an inconvenience to them than anything else.
The important thing to remember is you are not your government. And
correct.
In almost every single country, there are some countries that do better than others in terms of governing, but the biggest powers in the world, you are not your government. You are not a representative of your government unless you are listening to this and you're a politician and you know you're the one taking the bribes from the corporations. Well, then yeah, okay, you're kind of you can identify a bit more. But for everyone listening to this broadcast, your government doesn't represent you. They use you, and that's a really messed up relationship. And again, it just comes back to this whole idea. We need to be self-sovereign agents. We are all here together. We all want the same things, to be loved and to be safe and all these different things. And this division between countries and all this stuff, this is not the future of our society. And it comes back so much again to the banks have taken the power, and the governments and the banks and the corporations are all working together against people. And for some people that sounds shocking, like that couldn't be happening. I trust my government completely. Why?
Yeah, and another thing, it's on topic but off topic. I read an article recently that the IRS has been gutted by about 90% as far as staffing goes. They're so understaffed. And so what they decided to do is the first people they're going after are poor people who get the earned income tax credit. Those are the first people they're starting to audit. I went like 3 years and didn't pay taxes. And then last year I accidentally paid taxes because I wasn't going to, and I didn't think I'd get a refund. But they gave me a refund that was enough to cover like all my past years of taxes, which is crazy. I was pissed that I accidentally paid. So, but yeah, the IRS is, what's going on there is absolutely disgusting. I mean, they just print money. Why don't they just print enough money to fix everything? Yeah. But they don't.
Well, the interesting thing is that obviously the income tax is a very weird thing. And to see that kind of focus, like let's go after the income tax people first, not of course the billionaires who are, offshoring all of their profits and onshoring all of their losses so that they get tax rebates back.
Let me touch on that real quick. Right now, there's about $14 trillion in offshore accounts. One day the hammer's going to fall on that. And where do you think that money is going to go? It's got one place to go and one place only. A $14 trillion market cap on Bitcoin, and you have your $1 million Bitcoin. There you go.
There you go. It's a very interesting time to live in, to see these different ebbs and flows of where we're going. The system that we have built or has been built for us, it can't last because it's essentially anti-human when it comes down to it. A system that reinforces billions of people being in poverty and makes it difficult for them to get out of poverty, that's not the system of the future. A system which, we have this terrible symptom of our distrust and greed and power games, and that's the nuclear weapon. The fact that we've come to a point in our technology where we can, like that, extinguish everything, that is a symptom of a sick society, not a symptom of a society doing well.
Yes, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but fortunately, 99% of all countries out there don't want to use nukes. The only one that does is us. I have no doubts that if they could find an excuse to use nukes, they would. The nukes that were dropped in World War II didn't have to be dropped. Japan had surrendered. They were done. And we did it anyway to prove a point. And also they wanted to test a bomb. And also there was stuff going on with the Russians. They wanted to prevent the Russians from coming in. I mean, there was a whole lot of stuff around the dropping of nukes in World War II, or they weren't even nuclear then. They were atomic. I guess they weren't even close to what we have today. But it's political games by the rich, ultimately, and not just the rich across the board, but the I hate for it to come back to this, but there's about 20 families that control all the central banks around the world. They each have their own factions, and they're each always fighting with each other, and we get caught in the crossfire. So
it's like George Carlin said, it's a big club, and you're not in it.
It's a big club, and we sure as hell ain't in it.
It feels like the weird thing is with all the things you see going on in the media where, war is peace, et cetera, and that's literally what, they call bombs peacemakers. Mm-hmm. What kind of Orwellian twisted crap is that? Mm-hmm. And this is the thing. We have to go to war because we need peace. That's literally the narrative sometimes. Like, oh, if we don't invade Iraq, we're not going to have peace, so we have to go to war, right? And so it really feels like George Orwell's 1984 was... It wasn't an instruction manual on how the world's supposed to be. It was supposed to be a cautionary tale, but I find more and more that we are moving towards that place of overall social media censorship, government crackdown, government control, et cetera, and what happens in our generation is going to be a very important defining factor for the future of the world, because at no point in history have we had these technological tools that we now have. And that is such an important part of what's going on right now, is the technology, because the technology is what is going to either totally enslave us or free us on a way that we've never been free before. And most people can't even conceptualize the kind of freedom that we could have in terms of freedom of self-sovereignty, freedom from central banks and all this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And it's when you look at the narratives over the last, 60, 70 years, we had this I'm going to have a little fun with. So there was originally, you had McCarthyism and the Russians were coming, and that was horrible. And then it moved on to the Islamic terrorism, and oh my God, we have to be afraid of the Muslims. And Werner von Braun's assistant, I don't know if you've ever seen this video, Werner von Braun's assistant, basically back in the 70s, said that the next phase, once people come to realize that the terrorism was just a myth, and it really is. It's all been
massive myth.
Every terrorist attack that's ever taken place was a false flag, and they were definitely crafted by a government. But she said the next phase of the keeping us in fear is the alien false flag, and that they're going to try to create a space force in order to start to put weapons in space. And so I had seen that video years and years ago. And then I hear Trump get on TV and go, oh, we're going to create a space force. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is really happening. And I'm just having a little fun with that. I'm not a real big believer in that's actually going to come to pass, but that has been predicted. So if it does actually come to pass, know that it is fake, just as fake as McCarthyism and terrorism and all that stuff.
I see. I thought you were going to say Muslim Russians, because like that sounds really scary. But like, you know what? Aliens who are working with Muslim Russians. No, look, the reality is that these kind of BS ideas, they come out, and like you see like the space force, like that just sounds like the biggest black hole of your money and of debt. I mean, the debt's already at $22 trillion in the United States, and that's just one country. Look at most other countries, and they're all in crippling debt. And then they announce a space force. Let's spend some more money. Let's go into some more debt. And it'll just be generational and generational debt. It'll actually become a form of debt slavery, which, you know, you take it back to like the revolution and stuff like this, the idea of debt slavery and all these things, that was highly problematic. But it's actually building a situation where there'll be perpetual debt and perpetual debt servants to the central banks who have lent out all the money which is crazy. Again, debt is violence when it comes down to it, and Bitcoin is the opposite of that. Bitcoin is freedom. Bitcoin
absolutely
is not violence.
In the past couple of years, I've pretty much been able to get away from my debt. I don't have any credit cards. I have the remnants of a student loan I have to pay off, but once that's gone, I'm out the system. I'm not in debt at all anymore. And so I can't imagine a day going back to me having to borrow 20 grand for a car or get a mortgage on a house. That to me is insanity. So I feel like I've, to some degree, escaped that system. I don't have a job, which is awesome. I haven't had a job in years. Well, I've been self-sufficient. I guess, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a job, but I actually love what I do every day, and it keeps me up till late at night and get up early in the morning. To me, what I do, especially with this podcasting in crypto, it's a mission. I get up and I need to do it because I have to change the world, period. And the money will come later. I'm not overly concerned about that. Most people get up because they have to make that money. That paradigm is a foreign concept to me now.
I know exactly how you feel. It's coming out and doing what you love to do every day. Doesn't feel like a job. It's your hobby, and you might be able to make some money off of it, and pay your rent, which is great.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, before we finish, by the way, I wanted to give a shout out to Tone's Unconfiscatable conference. So can you give us a little bit of details on that?
Yes, Tone is running me ragged with his Unconfiscatable conference. I'm handling most of the media for it. I've been coordinating that. Today, I'm coordinating, Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert are going to be there. Today, I'm coordinating all their interviews, getting those scheduled. That is the ultimate Bitcoin maximalist conference. The subtitle is Bitcoin, not blockchain. It's small. I think we're only allowing 300 tickets to be sold. And we've got Saifedean, Trace, we got Willy Woo, Max and Stacy. I mean, all of the big names in Bitcoin are going to be there. We're doing a carnivore dinner. That's going to be amazing. But don't just be a carnivore person. Eat some vegetables too, please. And what else is going on? We have the poker tournament. There's still, I think there's only like 4 or 5 seats left in the poker tournament. And I believe there's only like 50 tickets left to the conference itself. It's 0.1 Bitcoin to attend. And you'll get to see and interact with all of these guys. It's going to be a very intimate event. It is at the D Hotel on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. So get your plane tickets, get your unconfiscatable ticket, and I really hope to see everyone there.
There'll be a link down below for anybody who wants more information on that. Corey, so the main takeaways today of the conversation: don't trust your government, buy Bitcoin, eat your vegetables.
Correct. And that's it. You know, it's funny. We have this big crypto media space, and all anyone really needs to hear is buy and hold Bitcoin. That's it. It could all be summed up in those words.
Thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a lot of fun for the chat. So thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Lark, thank you so much for having me. Talk to you very soon.